Hi, my name's Fiona, and I'm here to interview my dad, Scott Anderson, who's running as a candidate in the newly created riding of Vernon Lake Country Monashee. Dad, can you please describe this new riding?
Sure. Every 10 years, the government or Elections Canada redistributes the riding so that it makes sure that every riding has roughly the same number of people in it. And this is every 10 years, and because over the last 10 years so many people have moved to the Okanagan, the redistribution, which is sometimes very minor, sometimes it just moves a little boundary, but this one is two new ridings have been created in BC, and this is one of them. So there's no actual MP in these two ridings. Mel Arnold, who used to be in North Okanagan Shuswap riding, has now taken a different riding further east, leaving this riding with no MP whatsoever. And so a number of us are running to be as candidate nominees to be the candidate for the next election, whenever that's called. So whichever one of us is chosen will go forward as the Conservative Party candidate. The riding itself, the new riding, extends from basically Armstrong all the way down, including Lake Country, and a little bit in the West Side Road, and then it goes out east past Lumbee, past Cherryville, past McCusp, all the way past New Denver in the Slocan area, and almost all the way to Nelson. Not quite Nelson. Nelson is not in this riding, but everything else this side of it pretty much is. Mm-hmm. So that's the riding that we're created.
Can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I was born in Winnipeg and moved to India at age 5, and I lived there for 7 years, most of my formative years. And then the family moved to Mexico and eventually back here to Canada. I've been here in the North Okanagan for about 20 years, a little better than 20 years, and all of your life here, as you know. And after you kids launched, we went, Linda and I sold the house on Cummins Road and moved up to Longacre, where we live with Chili the dog, who you found in Mexico, falling out of a bush on Christmas Eve. Luke, my son, and your brother, went into the trades, and he's also a successful owner of a game store in Vernon called Obsidian. And you got a degree and are now training to be a commercial pilot. So you may have had an imperfect father, but you certainly turned out well, and I'm very proud of you both. I'm also a veteran of almost 10 years with the Canadian Forces Reserves, and I've served 2 4-year terms as a city councillor in Vernon. My academic background is in political studies, and I've got a first-class honors degree from the University of Manitoba and several years of graduate studies in the University of BC. I've worked as a legislative assistant with Diana Blonsey. I've worked as a financial services broker, as a vice president of sales, and as a business person. I currently own a couple of small businesses here in Vernon. But my work history isn't entirely white collar. I've also worked as a roughneck in Alberta, in construction in Manitoba, and I currently own ADR Environmental and Dump Runs, 2 small businesses in Vernon. And I do spend a lot of time on the trucks while I'm doing that. I think it's important to keep one foot in the blue collar world and one foot in the white collar world, because I think sometimes those two worlds look at each other differently, and I like to think that I'm able to relate to people from all walks of life, and I'm actually pretty proud of the fact that I'm as comfortable in a lunchroom as I am in a boardroom.
And what made you decide to run as an MP?
In politics, there are 2 types of politicians. There are seat fillers who like to retire into the paycheck and sort of live with the prestige of being an MP. And there are other ones who don't care so much about that, but who actually are movers and shakers and who like to make change and, be leaders when it's required. I found in 8 years as a city councillor in Vernon that I get a great deal of satisfaction from making positive change and working toward, making things better in this community. As an MP, I won't make false promises and tell you that I'm going to change the world and do all of these things, but I do promise to work very hard to make Canada a better place and make it even better than it is, and especially since I've lived in countries that aren't Canada, and I've seen how bad things can actually get.
Why do you think you're qualified to be an MP?
That's actually a really good question. I hear politicians saying all the time that they have deep roots in the community, that they care a lot about the people that are in the community, and that they're hard workers. And To me, those are the minimum entry qualifications of anybody trying to be an MP. A member of Parliament has wide-ranging duties, and they better care about the community, and they better have deep roots in it. It kind of makes me wonder why people join the race when they actually don't even live in the riding. But I think those are the minimum qualifications for an MP. And I think you have to believe in the cause that you're representing. I mean, in reality, being a member of Parliament is a good job. It's good money. It can be somebody could retire into it and not do much work and just collect the paycheck with the prestige that goes with it. So I think it's important when a new riding like this is created with no MP out there, there are going to be people coming out of the woodwork claiming that they're conservatives. And I think it's important for people to understand that there's history and understand the history of the candidates and whether they actually believe what they're saying or whether they just want the job. I've been a member of small C conservative parties at both the provincial and the federal level for as long as I can remember. I've got a 5-year membership with the Conservative Party of Canada, and I was awarded a lifetime membership with the BC Conservative Party. I've worked in Ottawa for Diana Blonsey as an MP, as a legislative assistant. I've been a member of numerous boards at both the provincial and the federal level as far back as I can remember. So nobody can actually claim that I am a conservative of convenience. And that, I think, is why so many conservative MPs have endorsed me. I think the count is up to 5 now. The last one being Betty Hinton, who wrote a beautiful letter, a one-page letter, outlining why she believes I make the best MP. John Duncan is a former cabinet minister under Stephen Harper. I believe I'm the only candidate nominee with any MP endorsements, and I've got several of them. So I think that speaks to the fact that people are willing to endorse me and put their names behind mine. I think really, really says a lot to me anyway. But again, I think those are all basic qualifications. I think, honestly, the real question is what do I bring to the table?
Well, what do you bring to the table? What makes you the best candidate, in your opinion?
First, because I was elected and I have a long track record, so everybody can see exactly what I did. And I think the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. And so I do have a long record to stand on. In fact, as part of the application for this position, I was asked to include any articles that mention my name. I guess they're looking for, to see how I operate as a politician, if I've said anything off color or anything like that. And we were surprised when we started Googling Scott Anderson Vernon that there were literally hundreds of articles. And none of this means that I'm super important, but it does mean that I'm not just a seat filler. There are small things that I've done, like banning pointed steel fences because deer were jumping over and impaling themselves, and I thought this was a cruel thing to do. And other things like the lights, the blue and white lights that you see driving through on the highway at night in Vernon. That all came from a motion that I made to, up our game and show a little bit civic pride when people drive through Vernon. Those are the small things that you don't hear too much about. The things that do make the media are more controversial subjects, and that, I think, points to a different ability, and that is the ability to stand up and speak even when it's uncomfortable. A lot of people seem to think that working cooperatively is very important, and it certainly is important. But to me, that's the easy part. When the BC Conservatives were in a politically tight spot, when there's a bit of a crisis politically within the party, I was elected unanimously by the board because I was seen as the only person who could actually bring both sides together and also being strong enough not to be bullied by either side. But I mean, that part for me is easy. What's hard is to be the person that raises your hand in a room full of peers who don't agree with you or who are working toward a certain point on the spectrum that I don't think is the right place to go. It's very hard to be the one to raise your hand and say, wait a sec, let's switch gears here. For example, when some of the other cities in BC, like Nanaimo and Victoria, were having tent cities sprout up, I made a motion that said that people have to take their tents down in the morning and they can't put them up to it at night. That sounds common sense in 2025, but in 2017 it was a hard thing to bring up because it seemed not compassionate. And when I first brought the motion up, it was voted down in council. And it was only, I think, a week later that somebody was shot in the leg in what was becoming a tent city in Polson Park, that the motion came back and was passed, I believe unanimously. So it was a common sense motion that was hard to pass. It only could pass when there was a glaring reason to pass it. And even then it cost, I believe, the city of Vernon $40,000 to clean up that small tent city. In my view, it's not compassionate to take somebody that's suffering from mental illness or addiction and say, go steal a shopping cart and live out your days as best you can on the streets. That to me is not compassionate, even if they're in a tent city. And the other thing is the impact on civil society of having those tent cities and having that sort of activity and that crime go on in our streets. I'm not a medical expert, but I think we're on the wrong path on that side. And I think we have to pay more attention to the impacts of that lifestyle on the rest of society. I think we need to change with both mental illness and addiction, and we need to work toward a more treatment-based solution than we are now. I think what we're doing now is enabling people. At the recent 2023 convention in Quebec City for the Conservative Party of Canada, I was asked to present a motion that nobody else wanted to present about gender dysphoria. It was to ban chemical and physical surgery on minors. And my reasons for that are quite clear. We don't let kids drive, we don't let them join the army, we don't let them drink, we don't let them smoke, and we even stop kids from getting tattoos. So why in the world would we not stop life-changing, life-altering surgeries that will impact kids for the rest of their lives before they're mentally able to handle questions like that? The motion ultimately did pass by quite a large margin. Those are just a couple examples of the things that I've brought forward that other people don't want to because it causes controversy and people like to avoid controversy. And I think in today's society with the curbs on freedom of speech and some of the pressures on politicians to conform, I think it's important to be able to raise your hand and disagree. You know, whether you're right or wrong, all sides of a question, I think, should be examined. And if nobody's willing to bring up one side, I think we've got a problem then, because then we're all becoming part of a groupthink that excludes real viable arguments that need to come forward. I also think it's important to use my military and academic skills to help where I can. Earlier, or late last year, I guess in November, we went with a group of us over to Ukraine and visited the front lines to bring medical equipment there. That's not the only reason we went, though. I wanted to see what the situation actually was in Ukraine. You cannot do that in the barrage of propaganda from both sides that are muddying the waters, and in the press you can't get a good impression. So part of my reason for going there was also to talk to other academics, NGOs, groups of people that are in Ukraine who are Ukrainian, and find out what they really believe. And this isn't just in Ukraine; it's actually along the front lines of the war, where the cities are being shelled on a more or less constant basis, and people are dying all the time. One of the hotels I was staying in was actually bombed 3 days after I left. One of the things I found is that the people of Ukraine are often forgotten in the discussions that go on about geopolitics. The CIA is installing governments and the Russians are invading countries and so on. And it all seems to be at a high level, well above the people who are actually on the ground living there. And I think it's important to be able to see what's actually happening there. And that's why I went there too.
What are the main issues you would want to focus on as a member of parliament?
Well, as a member of parliament, I'm also cooperating in this case with a number of other MPs from my party and from other parties when that's possible. So it's a little different from a city councillor where I can come up with my own ideas and put them forward. I can still do that. But as an MP, I'll have to do that in caucus. But I think that is just as effective a place to become a leader in caucus. where you can actually generate some of the ideas that then make it into the public. And I think I'm pretty well qualified to do that and to be a leader. One of the issues I want to concentrate on is firearms. This is a hot topic for people. I having been a military officer and as a current firearm collector, I understand firearms very, very well. And the rules that we're putting out right now for legal gun owners are, to me, onerous. Very little gun crime is committed by legal gun owners. And the reason is that the hoops you have to jump through in Canada to even own a firearm are quite onerous. I'm checked by the RCMP. I'm checked by not only criminal record, but any altercations I may have been in to see what my psychological temperament is. Once the permission is entered, it's monitored daily. If I, for instance, go and rob a store, I will instantly lose the ability to own guns. Any acts of violence like that. And that's monitored on a daily basis. So by penalizing legal gun owners who create almost no crime, it may be good optics for people who have never held a gun before in their life. But it's onerous to legal gun owners. It achieves nothing because it doesn't make us a safer place. It just means more money for the government and more headaches for registered gun owners. Another important issue for me is the economy. This Liberal government has so stifled innovation and entrepreneurship and resource development that now when we face a crisis on our southern border with the United States, we have no recourse. We don't have pipelines leading, so we can't turn the tap off to the Americans and turn it on to somebody else. We've lost our mines, our resource development, our wood harvesting. All of those things have suffered under this government because it's essentially regulated it to death. I absolutely will work to open resource development in Canada and to encourage entrepreneurship and to take away some of the regulations and cut taxes and make it easier for somebody who wants to start a business here to succeed at the business, and to make it much easier to diversify our economy so that we actually have a strong economy and not something that's so dependent on the largesse from south of the border. A third topic that's very close to my heart is the military. You know, as a military officer, I remember when the Chrétien government was in power, the military refers to that as the lost decade. And the reason they do that is because at that time, the Chrétien government just stopped recruiting, stopped buying material for the military. And so the military just started calling it the lost decade. Well, right now we're coming out of another lost decade because they say exactly the same thing has happened under the Trudeau government. When I was in Aldershot training, for instance, we were using Vietnam-era flak vests. When we went to Afghanistan, the Leopard 1 tanks didn't have air conditioning, and you couldn't use them in the desert because of that. People were dying inside. You know, we went over there with green uniforms into a desert scenario where you stand out like a sore thumb. Just things like that. We cannot put our soldiers into that kind of danger without supporting them. And I think that's especially important right now when our northern sovereignty is under attack. It's not that somebody's going to come and beat us up and take our resources. It's simply that other countries are going to ignore us because we have no footprint in the north. Even though it's our territory, there's nothing to stop other countries from showing up and starting to drill for oil and do things outside of the regulatory framework that Canadians have done that to make our resource extraction one of the safest in the world. So these things have to be addressed economically. Our Canadian military has got a strong history all the way from Vimy Ridge in the First World War to Helmand Province in Afghanistan. And as an MP, I will do everything in my power to rebuild our Canadian military into the strong force that it used to be. Because the more military footprint you have, the more seriously you are taken in the international arena. That is just a fact. We can talk about soft power, hard power. Honestly, it's the more hard power a country has, the more seriously they're going to be taken. And we are not being taken seriously right now, obviously, by our friends to the south. And finally, I think there are other issues that we have to deal with. I found as a city councillor that about 90% of my job was not trying to make change in a certain direction, but responding to crises. So I know people like to think of politicians as having a master plan that they keep on working toward, but the truth is that things pop out of the woodwork all the time. For instance, we've got in Edgewood right now, which is inside this riding, an ostrich farm that the Canadian Food Inspection Agency has ordered a cull of 400 ostriches because some of them have contracted bird flu. A number of them died, and the remainder, which is well over 300, I believe. There are academics and two prominent UBC geneticists who have come forward saying, look, these birds have natural immunity. They've developed natural immunity from, some of them died from the bird flu, but the ones that are there now are not sick. They're not showing any signs of the disease. And if we were allowed to test them, and we're not under these rules for some reason, we would find that they've got natural immunity. Now, this is not somebody on a farm. This is not some wacko saying this. These are respected scientists from UBC, tenured professors. The farm's response to the cull order was to go to the courts and try to get a stay of execution. They did succeed to hold it off for a month. But it struck me that one of the arguments the Canadian Food Inspection Agency made was that not culling the birds would have put us in violation of the WHO rules. Centralized planning to me is never workable. The NDP government in BC believes in centralized planning. It's a very clumsy operation. It treats all of the province as one region, and it just doesn't work. It's even worse on a national level, and the Liberal government has been big on trying to make these big centralized rules. That's bad enough. But when an unelected bureaucrat in Geneva makes the rules that affect an ostrich farm in Edgewood in Canada, that's completely unacceptable. There's no recourse whatsoever for any of this other than the courts. And that to me is just the worst case of bureaucratic overreach, rather. So I think we have to break this bureaucratic mold, and we have to start listening to the little guy a lot more. These people are on a farm. This is their life's work. Some faceless bureaucratic agency directed by Geneva is telling them that they have to destroy their livelihood, destroy their birds that are not even used for food because of an outbreak of bird flu that doesn't exist anymore.
Is there anything else you'd like to say?
The election for the nominees coming up sometime in mid-March, and I would ask people if they want strong representation in Ottawa to vote for me at that. Only Conservative Party of Canada members are able to vote for the nomination. Everybody obviously is allowed to vote for the person of their choice in the general election. But I think my qualifications are very, very strong. I think I've got a proven track record of being able to speak up. I think I've got a long track record of working with local organizations here in Vernon to make life better. But I think my strongest capability is that ability to speak up even when it's difficult, and to show leadership. So there's a number at the bottom of the screen. If anybody's got any questions after this, please don't hesitate to call. I'll try to answer them. I don't make any promises other than to work hard and to be a good representative here. I think Betty Hinton said it best in her recommendation letter, which I am eternally grateful for, is that of all the candidates, I'm the one most likely to be asked to be a parliamentary secretary or a minister, because I have got those academic and those work qualifications. So I would ask people to vote for me in March, and I promise you I will do the best I can. So if chosen to be the candidate, I really look forward to representing the people of Vernon, Lake Country, Monashee.